All right. I want to help people get to the other side. So we need to start with what normally happens. Okay. And again, my husband and I did everything wrong. So you're going to hear a lot of that throughout this webinar. So here's the first thing I want everybody to really understand. It's one of the secrets. Okay. And I talk about this at every single webinar because it is so important that people understand this. So the first secret is that marriage counseling done at the wrong time is going to cause more damage. Okay? Marriage counseling after betrayal is not the answer, but it's usually the first thing that people do when they find out that there's been an infidelity. Why? Well, because we go to Google most of the time, right? We start Googling things, especially if you're the betrayed partner. We're going to start Googling things. My wife cheated on me or my husband cheated on me. And what's going to come up? It's going to be all these marriage therapy, couples therapy. That is not the answer. And I'm going to give you a bunch of reasons why that's not the answer. Number one, this is not a marriage problem. And I want that to sink in. This is not a marriage problem. If I have a broken arm and I go to the eye doctor, my arm is not going to heal. Marriage counseling is the broken arm when really you need to see an eye doctor. Why am I so passionate about this? And I really am. First of all, because we did it and it didn't work. But let me tell you why. When we go to marriage counseling, first of all, there's an assumption that there's something wrong in the marriage, right? So you go to marriage counseling to help the marriage. All right, here's a couple things about that. Number one, marriage is a word. It's a descriptive word. It describes a relationship, a covenant, a pact between two people. So the word itself cannot have a problem. We've got two individual people, and those two individual people need two very different things. So when you go to marriage counseling, in fact, if you want, put it in the chat. Like, what do you think the goal of marriage counseling is, right? Like what is marriage counseling for? Why would a couple go to marriage counseling? If you've got any ideas, put it in the chat. I would love to see your, love to read your thoughts here. Why go to marriage counseling? Fix marriage issues for root cause, help open the lines up of communication. Oh gosh, they're coming in so fast. To have a mediator, to get along better, to learn to communicate. Absolutely. Those are great. Those are wonderful things, but none of those are going to heal the trauma that the betrayal has caused. So we go to marriage counseling to try to learn things like conflict resolution, how to communicate better, all the things that people just wrote in the chat. Those are not the root causes of what has happened. And that is certainly not going to help anybody who's in a trauma state. And make no mistake, betrayed partners are experiencing betrayal trauma. That is a real thing. Betrayal trauma has only been recognized since like the late 80s, early 90s. Prior to that, betrayal trauma wasn't even a thing. That's why, let's say my parents, grandparents, I don't know how old anybody else is, but that's why the old model was pretty much shove it under the rug. Forgive and forget. Just move on. Okay? Well, that's not going to fit. That's not going to fit today because now we know that this is a traumatic event in an adult's life. It's trauma. We didn't know that back then. So there was no trauma-informed work being done with couples dealing with betrayal. And unfortunately today, there's too many marriage counselors out there that do not have a trauma-informed background. That's not their fault. I'm not saying that they need to, but if they have a couple that's coming to them and somebody's in a trauma state, if they don't have a trauma-informed background, they're not going to be able to really help that person Can you help that person communicate better? Sure. But what about when they're in a triggered state? What about when their nervous system is completely dysregulated and they're flying off the handle and they're raging? That's trauma. Trauma lives in the body, not up here. Trauma lives in the body. So going to talk therapy, which we'll talk about a little bit later, going to talk therapy just in and of itself is not going to heal the emotional trauma that's inside. So going to marriage counseling to learn how to communicate better, great. That's a great goal and we need that, right? But that's not going to solve the right problem. One of the things that I say all the time is that you need to make sure, no matter what you're doing, you need to make sure you are solving the right problem. Solving the right problem. Communication is a symptom. Well, let me put it this way. Lack of communication is a symptom of a deeper problem. So if we just head right into, well, let's learn how to communicate better, but we're not solving the reason why I'm not a good communicator, not going to get very far. I'm going to get a couple tools, a couple techniques. You hold a pillow while I talk so you don't interrupt me, or, whatever it is, timeouts after 5 minutes, all of those tools and techniques they're great. I'm not putting them down, but that's not solving the root problem, which is, why do I not communicate my needs?